welcome everybody. We'd like to start off with our CEO, Paula Goldstein.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this important gathering. We're really pleased that we can be a part of this today from JFCS and partner with ADL around this really important topic. JFCS has been doing a lot of work in the community, supporting people emotionally through the crisis that has occurred since October 7th. And that's exactly what we're here today to do as well. We are very much committed to everyone's emotional well-being in our community. So I hope that you gain something from this today, both educationally and perhaps some personal healing as well. I am delighted to introduce Jeremy Fogel, ADL Board Chair, who is a principal and managing member of Ironwood Property Group, a commercial real estate investment and development firm based in Conshohocken. Jeremy has a long history serving ADL as well as other Jewish organizations and is also currently a member of ADL's National Commission. Jeremy?
Thank you. Thank you so much for the introduction. Jeremy Fogel, Board Chair for the Anti-Defamation League in our Philadelphia regional office. As someone who's deeply committed to both ADL and Federation, I'm so glad we're able to partner with JFCS and that so many of you have been able to join us today. Anti-Semitism has really skyrocketed, as we all know, in the US and around the world, and the effects are impacting all of us in our daily lives. And ADL works diligently every day to combat anti-Semitism and hatred and bigotry of all forms. We're looking to make the world a better place. And so it makes me think of tomorrow, Tu B'Shvat, which is the birthday of trees. Everyone hopefully knows the well-known story of Crony the elder, or Crony the circle maker. The old story goes that she ran into another elder in the village who was planting a carob tree. Carob trees take 70 years or so to bear fruit. And Crony asked, why would you plant a tree that will take so long to bear fruit that you likely won't be around to enjoy? And she answered, when I was a child, I enjoyed the fruits of the carob tree, trees that were clearly planted many years before I was able to enjoy them. And so as my ancestors planted for me, so too will I plant for our children. So it reminds us, even in these darkest days, when we continue our fight, not only for ourselves, but we're fighting for future generations. And I appreciate the opportunity to address you today, and I appreciate the work that everybody here is doing for our community. It is my pleasure to introduce the Anti-Defamation League Philadelphia Regional Director, Andrew Gretzky. Prior to joining the ADL 2 years ago, Andrew worked in higher education administration for 23 years. He holds a Doctor of Education, Higher Education Administration from the George Washington University. He holds a his dissertation research is on student engagement and mobile technology specifically. So he has interest in the proliferation of hate online and in online spaces. And his expertise has been invaluable to all of us, as that space has become really one of the primary focus areas for the hate that's been impacting our neighborhoods. So it is my pleasure to welcome our Regional Director, Andrew Gretzky. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jeremy, and thank you to JFCS for co-sponsoring this with us today and for working with us on this program. We're so happy to be able to partner with you. We know that since October 7th, we have felt a lot of trauma in the Jewish community. As Jeremy mentioned, I worked in higher ed for 23 years. Two things brought me to ADL. First was the Tree of Life massacre. I have a very vivid memory of dropping my son off at Hebrew school the next day, and for the first time in my life experiencing fear in doing so, and in being anything related to the synagogue, and that's trauma, even if not involved directly with what was going on in Pittsburgh. I think it impacted all of us, as we know October 7th did. I also came because after 23 years in higher education, I have been seeing for the last decade and a half, and spoke intensely through my interview process about the rising anti-Semitism, anti-Israel sentiment on college campuses, and have been talking. So today I'm going to be giving you a brief overview of ADL, the work we do, as well as where we are with anti-Semitism, specifically since October 7th. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Give me one moment. There we go. You should hopefully see my screen now. And talking about anti-Semitism today. So before I get started, I wanted to share two quotes. One is from a op-ed that I put out, as well as a speech that I did. And one of the things that I've seen happen when we talk about hate proliferating in online and many spaces is right now there seems to be this rhetoric that you can't be both for peace, dignity, and prosperity for Israelis and Palestinians. That if you're for Israelis, you have to be against Palestinians, and if you're for Palestinians, you have to be against Israelis. And so, as I had written in this op-ed, I want peace, dignity, and prosperity for Israelis and Palestinians, and I want Hamas terrorist threat to be eliminated, and I want safety and equity for people of all identity groups, whether it's race, religion, ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender identity, or any identity. And I want all extremism to be eradicated. And what's happening in the Middle East is no excuse for anti-Semitism and Islamophobia here. We've seen a rise in both. On October 7th, when the attacks occurred, our office actually jumped into action, contacting local law enforcement, state police in the 3 states that our region covers, as well as local police, asking them to increase patrols around Jewish institutions and Muslim institutions. Because we knew from the Israel-Gaza conflict in 2021 that increased conflict there resulted in a rise in incidents here. And law enforcement, our relationship with law enforcement was very paramount in being able to help address this issue, which we jumped into on October 7th when Hamas initiated its attack on Israel. ADL, for those of you that don't know, was founded in 1913 with the timeless mission to stop the defamation of the Jewish people and secure justice and fair treatment to all, because our founders knew then what we know now, that you can't fight one form of hate and bigotry without fighting all forms of hate and bigotry. And we look for a world where no group or individual suffers from bias, discrimination, hate. What we do, for those of you who may not be as familiar with some of our work, obviously we fight anti-Semitism, we combat extremism, we have individuals in our Center on Extremism who are monitoring and tracking information in online spaces, providing information to law enforcement. If you've heard of swatting and doxing, we've been working to try to thwart those types of things. We work to disrupt online hate and harassment. We know that hate proliferates through social media, and we try to thwart misinformation and disinformation, as well as looking to do policies. It was actually the work of the Center for Technology and Society in ADL that worked with Facebook to have them put a policy in place to remove Holocaust denial. We'd like them to enforce that better, but that policy didn't exist before that work. We work to protect civil rights, secure democracy and voting rights, challenging bias, bigotry, and discrimination. So we advocate at the state and federal level. We respond to incidents, etc. What guides our work is our pyramid of hate. Biased attitudes and acts of bias are at the base of this. Biased attitudes lead to acts of bias, which leads to systemic discrimination, which leads to bias-motivated violence, which can lead to the worst genocide. And the good news is that there are interventions at every level. The interventions at the first 2 levels is through education. The interventions at the second 2 levels is with advocacy at the legal level, as well as advocacy at the state level and federal level in order to avoid the pinnacle of that pyramid of genocide. And how do we do it? Regionally, we investigate, we advocate, we educate. We have a strong education program. We're in over 200 schools in the region doing No Place for Hate, for those of you who are in the Philadelphia region. Our other regional offices, for those of you who may be coming from throughout the Northeast today, have extensive engagement with No Place for Hate in schools in their areas. We investigate, so reporting incidents and getting incidents reported and looking into those and trying to provide support. And then we advocate in a variety of capacities. So understanding anti-Semitism, really wanted to make sure we're providing you data as we're talking about where things are today. We've been seeing an increase over the last decade. This has been in much of the media and news. And then unfortunately, since October 7th, we've seen a skyrocket of 360% in the aftermath of the attack in Israel. So according to the latest data, We're at over 3,200 incidents just in that 3-month span alone nationally. And so from October 7th, that's how many we tracked. When we compare it nationally to the data last year, it was 712 incidents, which is where we get the 360% increase. 60 incidents of physical assaults, 553 incidents of vandalism, 1,353 incidents of harassment, and 1,317 incidents of rallies that included anti-Semitic rhetoric and expressions of support for terrorism. Now, one of the things that's been talked about sometimes in news and media is that number and that rallies. ADL has included rallies that have anti-Semitic rhetoric in the past. The type of anti-Semitic rhetoric we talk about is when somebody holds up a sign at an anti-Israel or pro-Palestine rally where they say, for example, and I have a picture that I can show at some other points in other presentations where somebody has written, Jesus was Palestinian and you killed him too. That is clearly playing off the trope of deicide, and it provides misinformation and disinformation. And to be very clear, you can absolutely be critical of Israel and critical of the government of Israel, but you can't be anti-Semitically critical, and we discourage anti-Semitic criticism of the state of Israel. But if you were to take away all of those rallies, which I don't think you should, but if you were to take away all those rallies, there would still be almost 2,000 anti-Semitic incidents nationally if those rallies were not included. Surges in incidents that we have seen. The Israel-Hamas war obviously has brought a big piece of it. We have also seen an increase in white supremacist propaganda activity, and white supremacist groups have been far more organized in spreading their hateful ideology. We've seen an increase in incidents in K-12 schools and college campuses. We've seen physical attacks, and much of our assaults are on individuals who look Jewish and are visibly Jewish out in the community. And then over this past 6 months, from about July through December, we've seen a very significant increase in bomb threats and threats towards Jewish institutions and Jewish facilities, whether that's via email, phone call, etc. Because JFCS is based here in Pennsylvania, and I'm based here in Philadelphia, I did want to share a little bit of specific information about Pennsylvania for those of you who are here for that. In 2022, the right column, you'll see that we had over 340 cases filed with ADL. 114 of those were determined to be anti-Semitic. We had 348 instances of white supremacist propaganda. When you look at the 2023 data prior to October 7th, we were already seeing that we were going to be over the number from 2022, where we had 419 cases and 207 cases of anti-Semitism. But then after October 7th, we've had in our region alone in Pennsylvania, 334 cases filed, with 185 of those being determined anti-Semitic. Now, our numbers are not final until our audit comes out later this winter and early spring. We are still working with our Center on Extremism and our incident response team to review all of the incidents that have been reported to us. And so that information and the 2023 data. But as you can see, the number of cases has just been dramatic. For those of you who have experienced incidents, and I hope that you have not, please be patient with our offices. We generally have in the past tried to do a 48-hour turnaround on incident response, but given the large volume, that's taking a little bit longer these days. Common actions and trends. We see swastikas and graffiti. We see Heil Hitler salutes. I was at an Israel Solidarity rally in Philadelphia, and as I was walking, somebody was walking down the street and yelled Heil Hitler 3 times and raised the Heil Hitler salute while I was just walking as part of that parade. That's not pro-Palestine. That is anti-Semitic, pure and simple. And so we see memes and TikTok videos. We see groups and text chats, social media, a lot of Holocaust and Nazi comments, individuals who may have an Israeli flag put in their store or in their home. We see graffiti with swastikas put in place. That again is, 1, when you're doing graffiti, you're talking vandalism. 2, when you're using swastikas, In that type of scenario, you're clearly doing something that's anti-Semitic. Sample incidents, we had extremist individuals who made anti-Semitic and anti-Zionist comments during a city council meeting in December. We had a window of an Israeli restaurant that was smashed days after its owner was doxxed. Individuals associated with the anti-Semitic group, the Goyim Defense League, which is a white supremacist group, distributed propaganda in a residential area. High school students have sent anti-Semitic messages about the Holocaust to classmates in a group chat. We've seen this Heil Hitler component going on in many cases, and swastikas being drawn in dorm rooms. That's a brief overview of where we are with incidents. I think that as we just talk about the number of incidents and where things are, I do strongly encourage all of us to be very mindful of what we're posting and reposting. To be able to combat this, first, we have to report it. So please make sure you're reporting it. As I do speaking engagements and other pieces, and even with the numbers that have gone up, I have not walked away from a single speaking engagement in person where someone hasn't come up to me afterwards and they haven't reported an incident to anyone. When it comes to school age, what I will also share is we know that, and I know from my time as a dean of students, that students who are impacted by harassment, one of the last things they want to do is draw more attention to the incident. We do our best to always maintain the privacy and confidentiality of any individual who reports incidents to us. We will not necessarily go to the school without that person's involvement. But by having the data, what it permits us to do in some of those cases is go to school districts, and I've gone to a school district and said, we've received 13 complaints of anti-Semitism in your school district. And they've said, well, we've only gotten one. And it enables me to have the conversation to say, well, you have to ask why you haven't gotten the other 12. So having the aggregate data, having the information allows us to intervene and engage in the community and with school districts around strategy. So please make sure you're reporting it. Please encourage people to speak up as they continue to fight against this hate and extremism. And that's it for me. We'll jump to the next piece, and it is my pleasure to introduce Lisa Ney. Lisa Ney is the program officer at JFCS, who oversees Holocaust Survivor Support Program, non-Holocaust survivor, older adults, and people with disabilities. So Lisa, the floor or the Zoom room is yours.
Thank you, Andrew, and thank you for that recap and all of that information. I just want to acknowledge and remind folks that this topic can be very triggering for people. It could be very difficult. So please take care of yourselves. Feel free to step away, turn off your camera, get a drink of water, whatever you need to do. It's important that you just take care of yourself. I'm going to be speaking about stress and trauma and their effects on our minds and bodies a little bit. And then I'm going to talk about some self-care and tips around self-care and mindfulness. And then we're going to go into breakout rooms for about 30 minutes or so, because our main focus is really that we be able to engage and connect with each other and provide support and talk about the feelings and experiences that we've all been going through. Deborah, are you going to put up the slides? Thank you. You can go to the next one. Okay, go to the next one, please. I'm going to reverse these two. Okay, yeah, stress. So I'm going to talk a little bit about stress. We all know there's positive stress, right? That we could have a little bit of an increase in heart rate, a mild elevation in our stress hormone levels. This can be often a positive thing, right? Because it can help motivate us to success. I'm feeling it a little bit right now. It helps me to kind of be on hopefully my best game, right? So positive stress can be a helpful thing. Then there's tolerable stress. So tolerable stress could be like a death in the family or an illness. It's a little bit higher level of stress. And usually we can cope with tolerable stress because if we have support systems to help us to get through it. And then there's toxic stress, where it's a more prolonged activation of a stress response system in the absence, usually, of those support systems. This could be like abuse or neglect. Next, you go back to the previous slide, Deborah. Oops. Okay, thanks. So I don't know if you all know the whack-a-mole game. So whack-a-mole can really be a metaphor for the complexities of life. You don't know where those darn little moles are going to pop up, and you try to like bop them, and then they show up in another place. So it's a real challenge, and sometimes we're not fast enough or strong enough to be able to knock them back down. So this is kind of like what happens when our bodies get overwhelmed, when we can't get all of those moles and you feel threatened. So when you feel threatened, it can trigger a chemical reaction in your body that allows you to act in a way that's like a survival mechanism. So this reaction, many of you probably heard of, the fight, flight, or freeze. It's a stress response. And during that stress response, your heart increases, your heart rate increases, your breathing might quicken, your muscles might get all tensed up, your blood pressure might rise. And over time, this can be very harmful for us. Okay, Deborah, move ahead 2 slides. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about trauma. So trauma is the impact, right, when we have high levels of toxic stress that go on for a period of time. It can be one event or many events, and it can affect us psychologically as well as emotionally. And the stress is so intense that it can overwhelm our ability to cope. Also, everyone may react differently, just so you're aware. People cope differently to different types of stress. So anti-Semitism can also be trauma. We are experiencing stress for fear of another Holocaust, what's going to happen to the state of Israel, what's going to happen to us. We see these protests that Andrew was talking about, people threatening the extermination of the Jewish people. And our trauma is also culturally ingrained and genetically inherited. We're taught from a young age that, the Jewish people suffer. This is what happens to us. And a lot of us have family members that actually have suffered persecution, genocide, and expulsion. And when that anti-Semitism is so rampant, it feels like our family history is repeating itself. Next slide, please. Okay, so I just want to go over a little bit the signs of distress, feelings of numbness, disbelief, anxiety, fear, changes in appetite, energy, or activity levels, maybe difficulty concentrating or focusing, not sleeping well, having constant images in your head. And there can be a lot of physical reactions as well, and worsening of chronic health problems. Sometimes we might wonder why we're yelling at our kids or being impatient with coworkers. That's part of it. And maybe we're having more glasses of wine when we come home in the evening. And I want to talk a little bit about hypervigilance, because that's another sign. Many of us become very hypervigilant in this kind of situation, maybe on a high alert when we go out of the house, always wondering, scared. And a lot of that can just leave us feeling extremely fatigued and exhausted. Next slide, please. So I just want to review some of the effects of traumatic events: loss, grief, feeling isolated, identity questions. I don't know, I've had this experience. I have a son in college, and I've been telling him, please do not wear your Star of David necklace when you go around on the college campus. How many of us have had that experience, or telling our family members not to wear shirts with Hebrew on them right now? Other things, maybe feeling guilty, right? I'm not doing enough. I'm not helping Israel. I'm not being active enough. Feeling helpless and hopeless. Also, I added some things that aren't on the slide that I'll talk about. I'm going to talk about social media in a second. But like I should be doing more. I should be doing this. And then there's PTSD. When we're triggered and we get into a state of hyperarousal, we go into a state of that flight or flight I was talking about previously. And it's our brain really trying to survive. But now when we're having this chronic stressful situation and it's ongoing, we really don't know how it's going to be resolved or when it's going to end. And so that continual unknown is really creating, our brains are working a lot harder, and our bodies, to try to remind us that we're not in immediate danger right now. So it's really important to kind of try to be aware of that and be in touch with your feelings. Okay, we can go on. So dealing with online hate, Andrew touched on this a little bit. We are so bombarded with this on a regular basis. You know, we can't really control all of it all the time. We can turn on the TV. We can't control what's on the news, but we can control our exposure to it. We can decide that we want to limit ourselves or not be exposed as much. So there's all kinds of things that we can do. As Andrew said, report things on social media. It's really important to report it. I don't know if you're aware that there's an algorithm on social media that talks about basically what happens is if you react to a negative post, it sends out an algorithm that basically then allows that post to move more, actually. So what will happen is not only you, but a lot of your friends and family members will start getting those posts even more as well. So it's important to be aware of that. Some people talk about a digital detox, powering down, really like even going a day without looking at your phone at all is really important, because we don't realize also how dehumanizing it can be to be on social media. It decreases our ability to empathize with other people, because social media is not always real, and you're only seeing parts of a person. You're not interacting personally. You're not seeing that person in the whole of who they really are as a person. So also being aware and mindful that when you're just scrolling through feeds and seeing all different images, it can be really impacting on your wellness. Take care of your well-being, and you can manage your feed. It's very important to take breaks often from social media. Okay, next slide. So some of the signs and symptoms, when can it become a challenge for us? It's very important to look at the duration, impact, and frequency. How often, for how long are we feeling that we're impacted by things? And really looking at how are we able to function on a daily basis. If I'm not sleeping at night, I'm not able to eat, I'm not functioning at work, this could be a time when it could be helpful to be able to process with someone else one-on-one and get some additional resources, which we all need sometimes in our lives. Okay, next. Okay, so what helps? It's really important to have connection now more than ever. We really need that connection with others and finding hope in community. And community can be anything. It could be a faith-based community. It could be a class you're taking or a hobby. It could be a group of neighbors, group of friends, but just finding those folks that you can connect with to provide support. And I think it's really important to honor Jewish joy as much as we honor Jewish pain. You know, as a Jewish people, often we tend to really get stuck in the pain and suffering, but it's important that we continue to celebrate our Jewish identity and our history. Also, a health-related commitment. You can make a commitment to yourselves every day. I'm going to do one thing that's healthy for myself today, whether it's taking a walk, being in nature, turning off the TV, or eating something healthy. And setting limits, routine, all things that we know about. And I think it's more important. I'm reviewing these things not because we aren't always aware of them, but because it really takes discipline and commitment and to be accountable to ourselves so that we can really have resilience, be as healthy as possible. I'm going to talk in a minute about mindfulness and breathing. And I think having compassion is really important as well, having compassion for ourselves and compassion for others. And grace. Grace is something that is really important. We need to be giving ourselves a lot of grace these days and not judging ourselves and being harsh on ourselves. Okay, next slide. So this is called the buddy system. You can come up with a plan and share it. If you have one who's that person, find that person that can help you and be accountable to each other. We often, need help to be able to take care of ourselves. So it's important to acknowledge positive things that happen every day, not just complain about the difficulties and stress about what's going on, but acknowledge those small accomplishments. Monitor each other, check in with each other. Did you take a break for lunch today? Did you do something, take your walk today? It's really important to help us as well. Okay, next slide. So mindfulness, our heads get stuck and filled with all that noise and images and things like that. So mindfulness is really about trying to get rid of all of that noise in our heads and really to try to be present and in the moment. So we're going to talk more about this. Go on. Okay, so there's all different ways during the day that you can have a mindful moment. When you wake up in the morning, you don't necessarily have to jump right out of bed. You can take a few moments, do some breathing, When you go in your shower, you can just stand under the hot water and feel the sensation on your body. Cooking and eating and driving as well. There's all opportunities for moments during our day to have a mindful moment. Next. This is a breathing exercise, and this is really important in terms of grounding ourselves and just trying to breathe to relax ourselves. So it's something where you just kind of sit with your feet on the floor and you breathe in to a count of 4, hold it for a count of 4, breathe out for a count of 4, and then hold it again for a count of 4. So this is an important exercise. I just wanted to throw it out there. We use this a lot when we're working with our groups, and I think it's very helpful to everyone. Next. Okay, this is a grounding exercise, and we use grounding a lot to help kind of bring us back to the present moment. So grounding is a self-soothing tool that we use when we're feeling stressed or overwhelmed. It helps us to keep us in the present and to reorient us to the here and now and to reality. And it kind of lets our brains know that we're not in that moment of danger that we need to be surviving. It also helps to normalize the cortisol in your brain, which can calm the electric activity in your brain and normalize the tension that you might feel in your body. So this is just a little exercise you can do just sitting in your room or in your office. Take a break, look at 5 things that you see in the room, 4 things that you can hear around you, 3 things that you can feel. I feel the chair that I'm sitting in. I feel the chair that my feet on the floor. And then 2 things that you can smell and 1 thing that you can taste. So this is an exercise that we use often in our work. And then I'm going to just end with some daily suggestions. What I'm thankful for today, who am I checking in on today, what expectations can I let go of today, and what is one nice thing that I did for myself. So that's just a little reminder of some things that we can also do on a daily basis. Now we're going to go into breakout rooms. And I really want to request, it's really a time for us to connect with each other, provide support, share a little bit about what we've all been experiencing with anti-Semitism and how we're coping. We don't want this to be a political discussion. We're not going to be solving the problems of the Middle East today. So let's really try to focus on really kind of supporting each other and connecting. So Deborah's going to do some magic, I think, and put us in breakout rooms. So you'll get a notice of to join your room, and you just click on it, and then you'll get into your room.